Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're exploring the world of Carl Jung, but not just his theories. We're going to try to understand Jung the man through the lens of the Enneagram.
Oh, very cool. That's a fascinating approach, like we're adding a whole new dimension to how we see him.
Exactly. Our source materials suggest that Jung was a social five on the Enneagram. Um, that type that's known for always searching for knowledge and truth. But, it goes deeper than that, right? The social five has this thing called a passion for the totem.
Hmm.
They're driven to find the essential truths of existence, and it shows up in everything they do.
Yeah, when you really look at Jung's work, it really is like a roadmap of that social five journey. I think about his concept of the collective unconscious. Like he wasn't satisfied with just, surface level explanations of the human mind. He went deep,
Mhm.
searching for those universal archetypes that connect us all.
Oh, he did, definitely. He went way beyond just theories,
Yeah.
exploring those ideas in myths and symbols and ancient traditions.
Yeah, and his fascination with alchemy is a perfect example. For Jung, alchemy wasn't about the actual chemical processes. It was all symbolic, a representation of the psychological journey of individuation. You can really see that social five drive to decode the system, to understand the structure underneath it all.
It's like he was trying to crack the code of the human experience, right? To find the patterns that repeat across cultures and across time.
Exactly. And our source material highlights how social fives will often idealize systems and ideas. They find something that clicks for them, that makes sense to them, and elevate it to a place of like sacred importance, almost.
Okay, so that makes me think of Jung's relationship with Freud. I mean, initially, he was really drawn to Freud's psychoanalytic theories.
Oh, like many were at the time. I mean, Freud's ideas were revolutionary. But as Jung, matured, developed his own ideas, he started to shift away. And what's interesting is how he then put his own concepts, like archetypes and individuation, on that same pedestal he'd had for Freud's work. It's a classic social five move, going from disciple to master, forming their own unique understanding of the totem.
So it's not about throwing knowledge away, but more about evolving and refining it, creating your own framework.
Yeah, exactly. The social five absorbs, analyzes, synthesizes, and then builds their own system of understanding. And this thirst for knowledge, it often overshadows their desire for emotional intimacy.
The source mentions that.
Yeah.
But I think it's easy to get the wrong idea.
Yeah.
Does that mean Jung was like cold or detached?
Not necessarily. It's more about prioritizing intellectual connection. For a social five, knowledge is their lifeblood. It's how they connect with the world.
Okay, so how did this play out in Jung's personal life?
Well, his relationships often had this kind of hierarchical quality to them. It was either a student-teacher dynamic, like we saw with Freud, or he was the master, guiding his own students. Knowledge and intellectual exchange were always at the forefront.
It seems like he viewed relationships as opportunities for intellectual growth rather than just purely emotional bonding. Which
Yeah.
brings us to his bowling and tower,
Right.
building your own tower. That's a pretty strong statement about needing space.
Right. It's like a physical representation of that social five need for isolation. But think about it, to really delve into those universal truths, to connect with like the sublime, you need to step back from the everyday world. Bollingen was Jung's space for introspection, for connecting with his inner world.
So it wasn't about rejecting the world, but creating the ideal environment for deep, focused work.
Precisely. It was his sanctuary for writing, meditating, and exploring those deeper layers of the psyche. For a social five, that solitude is restorative.
It's amazing how he created this physical space to mirror his internal world. And what's striking is the sheer breadth of his intellectual interests. Alchemy, astrology, Eastern philosophy, esotericism, he was all over the place.
That curiosity, it's another hallmark of the social five. They're driven to connect the dots, to see how everything fits together. They're not content with just one area of knowledge. They have to understand the principles that govern everything.
It's like they're piecing together a giant puzzle
Yeah.
and always searching for those missing pieces.
Yes. And for Jung, that meant exploring different cultures and traditions, constantly expanding his mental map of the universe.
It almost feels like Jung's life mirrors the archetype of the shaman, someone who travels between worlds, seeking knowledge, and then bringing back wisdom to share.
That's a really insightful connection, and it ties in perfectly with one of Jung's key concepts, the wounded healer. He believed that the most profound healers are often those who have confronted their own darkness, their own wounds.
So his journey into his own unconscious, the one documented in the Red Book, was almost like a modern-day shamanic descent.
Absolutely. He wasn't just reading about the unconscious, he was experiencing it directly. He was wrestling with his shadow self, exploring those deepest parts of his psyche.
He was living the archetype, taking that quest for knowledge, not just through books, but within himself.
And that's what makes his work so compelling. It's rooted in his personal experiences, his struggles and triumphs in the face of the unknown. It gives his theories a depth and richness that resonates with people even today.
It really does. And speaking of venturing into the unknown, there's this concept of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that hint at some kind of hidden order in the universe.
Synchronicity. It's one of those Jungian ideas that really captures the imagination. It's about those moments where the veil between, the ordinary and the extraordinary seems to thin, and you get a glimpse of something more.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the world through those Jungian colored glasses you mentioned.
Yeah.
Everything feels like a potential synchronicity now. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's bring it back to the social five. The source mentions that Jung has similarities to other notable social five figures, like Buddha and Claudio Naranjo.
Oh, that's a fascinating point. Even though they come from such different backgrounds, different times, there are some striking common threads.
Like what? Give me the highlights.
Well, first and foremost, that relentless search for universal truths, whether it's Buddha's path to enlightenment, Naranjo's exploration of consciousness, or Jung's dive into the collective unconscious. They're all driven by that insatiable need to understand the fundamental nature of reality.
It's like they're all asking those same big questions, but coming at them from different angles.
Exactly. And another thing they share is that use of isolation as a catalyst for growth.
Wow.
Jung had his Bolinen Tower, Buddha had his meditation retreats, and Naranjo, he had his periods of introspective withdrawal. It wasn't about escaping the world, but creating space to connect with those deeper truths.
So for them, solitude wasn't a punishment, but a pathway to a richer understanding of themselves and the universe.
Precisely. And finally, there's that master-disciple dynamic that we talked about earlier. They were all both teachers and students, constantly learning, evolving, sharing their insights with others.
It's like they were all part of this ancient lineage of wisdom seekers, each one building on the foundations laid by those who came before.
It's a beautiful image, this interconnected web of knowledge that transcends time and culture.
Okay, wow, we have covered a lot of ground here. We've gone into Jung's life and work, exploring how his social five personality shaped his ideas and his choices. And what's really fascinating is how this understanding can help us see his work in a whole new light.
Absolutely. It's like we've unlocked a new level of appreciation for his brilliance and the depth of his insights.
But before we get too deep into that, let's take a quick break and let all this amazing information sink in. We'll be back in a flash to continue our exploration of Carl Jung through the lens of the social five.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Carl Jung. Before the break, we were talking about how Jung, as a social five, really embodied that dynamic of both master and disciple.
That back and forth between seeking knowledge from those they consider masters and then, stepping into that role themselves, sharing their insights with the world. It's like this cycle of learning and teaching.
Exactly. And for the social five, it's not about ego or a need for power or anything like that. It's this deep desire to understand and be understood through that exchange of knowledge.
And we see that so clearly in Jung's life, starting as a disciple of Freud, really immersed in those groundbreaking theories. But then as he develops his own ideas, he steps into that role of master, guiding a new generation of thinkers.
It's a perfect illustration of that social five journey. Absorb, analyze, synthesize, and then they create. They're not content to just repeat what they've learned. They need to, make it their own, offer their unique perspective on the totem.
Like they're refining the wisdom they've gathered, distilling it down to its essence, and then passing the torch, so to speak.
That's a great way to put it, because for the social five, knowledge really is a precious resource, something to be protected, nurtured, and shared with those who are ready to receive it.
And this brings us back to that idea that Jung's life, in many ways, reflects the archetype of the shaman. Someone who ventures into the unknown, confronts their own darkness, and then returns with wisdom to share with the community.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? And it connects directly to his concept of the wounded healer. The idea that the greatest healers are often the ones who have faced their own shadows, their own inner wounds.
So his personal journey into his unconscious, the one he documented in the Red Book, becomes a modern-day example of this shamanic descent. He wasn't just reading about it, he was living it.
Absolutely. He spent years exploring those depths of his own psyche, confronting those hidden parts of himself. And it was through that process that he gained these incredible insights into the human mind, insights that he then shared with the world.
He went on a vision quest, not, in the traditional sense, but by journeying into the wilderness of his own mind. And what's so compelling is that he wasn't just studying shamanism, he was embodying the archetype.
And the source material even points to other instances where this shamanic aspect comes out in Jung's life. Like, for example, Seven Sermons to the Dead. It's this really esoteric text, almost like he was channeling a voice from beyond, full of symbolism and mystical imagery, very much in line with that shamanic tradition of connecting with other realms.
That sounds pretty intense.
It is. And then there are his travels to Africa and America, where he immersed himself in these indigenous cultures, exploring their rituals and beliefs. He was actively seeking wisdom from different traditions, just like a shaman would.
So he was literally going out into the world, collecting these different threads of knowledge and weaving them together in his understanding of the human psyche.
And those experiences really deeply influenced his concept of archetypes and the collective unconscious. He saw how these universal patterns showed up in all these different cultures, and it strengthened his belief in this deeper layer of reality that connects us all.
He gives me chills just thinking about it. He was on this lifelong quest to uncover the hidden language of the soul. And speaking of hidden languages, there's his concept of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that suggest this kind of deeper order to the universe.
Ah, yes, synchronicity. One of those Jungian ideas that really sparks that sense of wonder and possibility. It's like those moments when the universe kind of winks at you, reminding you that there's more to reality than meets the eye.
It's not just coincidence, it's about meaning. Those moments where the lines between the ordinary and the extraordinary blur.
Exactly. And for Jung, synchronicity was a glimpse into that hidden order, a sign that there's more going on than our everyday perception lets us see.
And how does that tie back into the social five personality?
Well, remember we were talking about that constant tension in the social five between the mundane and the sublime. They're always searching for those glimpses of the extraordinary, those moments that break through the everyday routine.
So for them, synchronicity is like validation, a sign that they're tuned into a deeper frequency.
Precisely. It's like the universe is saying, yes, you're on the right track. You're seeing something real, something significant.
It makes you wonder how much his theories were influenced by his own social five lens. He was so fascinated by symbolism, by the unconscious, by those hidden meanings that lie beneath the surface.
That's a fascinating thought. It's like his way of seeing the world became woven into the very fabric of his work. Not to say his ideas aren't valid, but it gives us another layer of understanding, another piece to the puzzle.
It really highlights how our individual perspective, our personality, shapes how we interpret the world.
And that's one of the most valuable things about the Enneagram. It helps us understand the motivations behind people's actions, their thoughts, their creative expressions.
It's not about labeling or boxing people in. It's about deepening our understanding and compassion for ourselves and others.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about celebrating our unique ways of being in the world.
Well said. So we've explored Jung's life and work, his journey into the unconscious, and his fascination with synchronicity. But before we wrap things up, I want to connect this back to the Enneagram and those other notable social five figures we talked about earlier, Buddha and Claudio Naranjo. What can we learn from their shared journey?
That's a great question. It is fascinating how these individuals, even though they came from such different backgrounds, different times, share such a striking similarity.
Like what? What are some of the key connections?
Well, the most obvious one is that deep yearning for universal truths. Buddha's quest for enlightenment, Naranjo's exploration of consciousness, Jung's exploration of the collective unconscious. It's all driven by that insatiable desire to understand the essence of reality.
Like they're all asking these profound questions, but using different, languages and frameworks.
Exactly. And another commonality is their embrace of solitude as a catalyst for growth. Jung had his Bullingen Tower, Buddha, his meditation retreats, and Naranjo, he had those periods of introspective withdrawal. For them, solitude wasn't about escaping the world, it was about creating the space to dive deeper, to connect with those truths that they were seeking.
So it wasn't about rejecting the world, but finding a clearer perspective on it, away from the noise and distractions.
Precisely. And finally, they all embodied that master-disciple dynamic. They were both teachers and students, always learning, always evolving, always sharing their insights.
It's like they were all part of this timeless chain of wisdom seekers, each link building on the strength of the one before it.
And that's such a powerful image, this interconnected web of knowledge that spans across cultures and time, uniting these individuals in their pursuit of understanding.
It really is quite inspiring. But before we get carried away with the inspiration, there's another important aspect of the social five that I wanted to touch on. It's something that often gets overlooked, but it's crucial for understanding Jung's journey.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, the source material mentions how social fives, despite all their knowledge and insight, can often struggle with a sense of inadequacy, a feeling of not being enough.
That's an excellent point. It's easy to forget that behind that confident intellectual exterior, there can be this deep-seated fear of being exposed as a fraud.
It's like this paradox. They're driven to acquire knowledge, but also afraid of what that knowledge might reveal about themselves.
And that fear, it can manifest in different ways. Some social fives might withdraw even further, retreating into their world of knowledge as a form of protection.
It's a defense mechanism,
Mhm.
a way to shield themselves from that vulnerability, from the potential pain of not being good enough.
Precisely. While others might overcompensate, becoming even more intellectual, more authoritative, as if to prove their worth through their vast knowledge.
It's like building this fortress of knowledge around themselves for protection and validation.
Mm.
It really highlights that inner struggle between wanting connection, but also fearing judgment and rejection.
Exactly. And that fear, it can be a real obstacle to their growth and development.
But the source material offers a way for social fives to overcome this hurdle and embrace their true potential.
I'm all ears. Tell me more.
It involves recognizing that knowledge isn't just about facts and figures. It's also about wisdom and compassion.
Ah, connecting the head and the heart.
Exactly. It's about understanding that true mastery isn't about being perfect or knowing everything. It's about embracing those imperfections, being willing to learn and grow.
That's a beautiful message. It's about letting go of that need to be right all the time and embracing vulnerability, allowing ourselves to connect with others on a deeper level.
And that's a message that resonates with all of us, regardless of our Enneagram type. We all have those insecurities and fears. And it's through embracing those vulnerabilities that we can truly connect with ourselves and each other.
Absolutely. It's about honoring our individual journeys and recognizing that we're all works in progress, constantly evolving and becoming.
Well, we've certainly explored a lot today. We've delved into Jung's life, his work, his personality, even touched on the experiences of other notable social fives. It's been quite a journey.
It has. And I think we've come away with a much richer understanding of Jung, not just as this, brilliant mind, but as a complex individual navigating his own path.
And for our listeners, I think this is just the beginning of the exploration. Now that we've looked at Jung through this new lens, how might it change the way you interpret his theories and ideas?
That's what's so exciting. It opens up a whole world of possibilities, new ways of seeing ourselves and the world around us. It's all about perspective, and I think this deep dive has given us a fresh one.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up our deep dives into the world of Carl Jung, the Social Five. And we're back, diving deep into the world of Carl Jung. We've been exploring his life and work through the lens of the Enneagram, focusing on the Social Five. And wow, it's been a really insightful journey.
It really has. We've uncovered how his deep desire for knowledge, that passion for the totem, as we called it, really fueled all his groundbreaking work on the collective unconscious, archetypes, and even synchronicity, right?
Yeah, and we've also seen how the Social Five tendencies, towards introspection, intellectualization, how those played a big role in his life choices, like his sometimes complicated relationship with Freud and even his decision to build the Bowling Tower.
It's like we've been peeling back the layers, revealing the man behind the theories. And what's so fascinating is how understanding Jung as a social five can actually give us a deeper appreciation for the nuances of his work.
It's like having a key, right? To unlock some of those hidden meanings and motivations within his theories. For example, his emphasis on individuation, on becoming a whole person, a complete person. That could be seen as a reflection of his own personal journey as a social five, couldn't it?
That's a great point. Remember that tension we talked about between isolation and connection, and that fear of vulnerability that a lot of social fives deal with. Individuation, in a way, is all about transcending that fear. It's about embracing every part of ourselves, even the shadow parts we try to hide.
So it's like Jung wasn't just exploring these concepts intellectually, he was working them out in his own life. striving for a sense of wholeness and integration.
Exactly. And that's what makes his work so powerful, so relatable. It's not just like cold abstract theory. It comes from his lived experience, his struggles, his triumphs. It resonates because it's authentic, deeply human.
And it makes you think, right, how much of his fascination with symbolism, with the unconscious, was shaped by his social five lens, always looking for those deeper meanings, those hidden connections.
Absolutely. It's like he projected his own way of seeing the world onto the world itself, which isn't to say that his ideas aren't valid. It just, it enriches our understanding of where they came from, adds another dimension to his work.
It's a reminder that every great thinker, every artist, every innovator approaches their work from a specific perspective, a unique way of experiencing reality.
And recognizing that perspective can help us appreciate their contributions even more, allows us to see their work in a whole new light.
It's like getting a behind-the-scenes look at the creative process, seeing how their personality shapes their art.
And that's one of the most valuable things about the Enneagram, I think. It's not about, putting labels on people. It's about understanding the driving forces behind their actions, their thoughts, their creations.
It cultivates empathy and compassion
Mhm.
for ourselves and for others by acknowledging the beautiful tapestry of human experience.
Beautifully said. It's about celebrating the fact that we each have our own unique way of being in the world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Carl Jung, the Social Five, I want to leave you with this. How might this new understanding of his personality inform your own exploration of his work? How might it inspire you to see yourself and the world around you in a fresh way? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. Until next time.